You know that feeling when you're driving, relying completely on your GPS, and the screen shows you cruising down a perfectly paved, multi-lane highway, but you look out the windshield, and you are actually bouncing through a muddy, unpaved cornfield.
Oh, yeah. It is a deeply unsettling cognitive dissonance. Like, you have this sudden sinking realization that the map you were trusting is just fundamentally disconnected from the physical reality outside your window.
Right. That is the exact feeling we're tackling today. We have to look at a geopolitical argument that suggests we are all, looking at a broken GPS when it comes to the Middle East, global energy, and American power. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to unpack a highly provocative analysis from a recent transcript featuring retired Colonel Doug Macgregor on the Daniel Davis channel. We are breaking down some incredibly sweeping claims about the complete realignment of global power structures.
Which means, we really need to set the ground rules for you listening right at the top.
Yes, absolutely.
The claims being made in this source material are intense, they're controversial, and they touch on heavily politicized issues regarding U.S. leadership, the war in Ukraine, Middle Eastern policy, and global finance.
Yeah, and I cannot emphasize this enough. We are not taking sides today. We are not endorsing these viewpoints. Our job, strictly and entirely, is to map out and impartially report the arguments made in this specific source material.
Exactly.
Think of us as tour guides through a very specific worldview. We are here to see how its internal logic holds together so you can understand the perspective being presented.
And the central pillar of McGregor's worldview, like the premise that holds all his other claims together, is that everything we are being told about American control in the Middle East is an illusion.
An illusion?
Yeah. He frames former President Trump as acting as a salesman, projecting a total success that doesn't actually exist on the ground, while a massive shift in global power happens right under our noses.
Yeah.
Specifically, McGregor asserts that the U.S. no longer controls the Strait of Hormuz.
Wow.
He claims Iran does.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical choke points for global energy on the entire planet.
Right.
So, to understand this source's claim about global power, we have to start with the most tangible metric of control we have in that region, which is the price of oil.
Yeah, it always comes back to oil.
The transcript provides a very specific and honestly mind-bending data point. So, Saudi Arabia admitted that Houthi missile strikes on Yanbu and other processing centers took roughly 4 million barrels of oil a day offline.
Just to put that number in perspective for a second, taking 4 million barrels a day offline is like a massive artery in the global economy suddenly being clamped shut.
It's huge.
The immediate physical reality is a drastic, sudden reduction in supply.
So, basic high school economics dictates the price of oil should just skyrocket, right?
I think so.
But according to the transcript, the live price of oil actually dropped to $78.60. That's a decline of nearly 4.7%. I really struggled with this when reading the source. Like, how does Macgregor explain a massive disruption in supply leading to a drop in price?
Well, he points directly at the mechanics of the financial markets, specifically Wall Street manipulation and the practice of shorting oil.
Shorting, okay.
Yeah. He alleges that friends of Trump and what he terms a Zionist billionaire club are artificially driving the price down.
Wait, I need to pause you there because we can't just throw around a term like shorting without explaining the mechanism.
Fair enough.
As I understand it, shorting is essentially a financial bet that an asset's price will go down. So you borrow something, you sell it at today's price, and you hope to buy it back cheaper later to return it, pocketing the difference.
Exactly.
But how does that paper bet override the physical reality of a burning processing plant?
What's fascinating here is how Macgregor separates the paper price from the physical price.
Okay.
Because in modern commodity markets, traders in New York or London are buying and selling futures contracts, basically promises for oil months down the line. They aren't trading physical barrels of liquid.
Right, they're just trading numbers on a screen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So Macgregor's arguing that if massive institutional players flood the market with short positions, basically shouting to the algorithm, hey, we bet the price will drop because we assume the U.S. will fix this well, then the ticker price on a screen drops.
Oh, wow.
That $78.60 is a paper illusion created by traders who, as Macgregor notes, have probably never even seen an oil field.
It's like looking at the betting odds for a football game. The star quarterback just broke his leg on the field. That's the physical reality, the missing 4 million barrels.
Yeah, good analogy.
But a billionaire whale just placed a massive artificial bet on that team to win anyway, which skews the odds on the screen, so the scoreboard is just lying.
That is a perfect way to visualize Macgregor's argument, because he claims that if you step away from the Wall Street screens and actually try to buy physical oil coming off a fully loaded ship right now, the real price is closer to $140 a barrel.
Wait, really? 140?
Yeah, nearly double the paper price.
Yeah.
The physical reality, according to him, is that nothing leaves the Persian Gulf unless Iran allows it to, and the oil that is leaving is largely Iranian and heading directly to China.
But hold on, isn't there a massive danger in assuming financial markets can just entirely disconnect from physical realities forever? I mean, eventually those contracts come due. The paper market has to meet the physical market.
And that impending collision is exactly what Macgregor is warning about. The market is pricing in a return to the status quo, but he argues the status quo is completely dead.
Okay, so if the sea routes, like the Strait of Hormuz, are completely locked down by Iranian leverage, Washington's only logical move is to bypass the water entirely. You have to build overland pipelines, right?
You would assume that's the workaround?
Right. And in the text, there's a claim mentioned originally from Jesse Waters, I think bragging that the U.S. secured Iraqi investment to build a pipeline bypassing Hormuz altogether to neutralize Iran.
Yeah, and Macgregor's reaction to that specific claim is absolute fierce rejection. He calls it complete and utter nonsense.
I found his dismissal of that pipeline idea really telling because he doesn't just say, oh, it's too expensive. He argues it ignores the geopolitical reality check of the last 2 decades. He points specifically to the U.S. removal of Saddam Hussein in 2003.
Right. Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, the 2003 invasion fundamentally flipped the board.
How so?
Well, Saddam Hussein led a Sunni-dominated government that acted as a brutal but effective counterbalance to Shia-majority Iran. By removing him, Macgregor argues the U.S. inadvertently empowered Iraq's Shia majority, effectively turning Iraq into an eternal ally of Tehran.
Oh, which completely explains why the source points out that the Iraqi parliament has repeatedly voted to direct U.S. forces to leave.
Yeah.
Macgregor even claims that Iraqi militias are poised to march in and seize control of Kuwait. So he's painting a picture where the Iraqi government would just never cooperate with a U.S. pipeline project designed to explicitly hurt Iran's strategic leverage.
You're touching on the exact political roadblock Macgregor highlights. But he also emphasizes the sheer physical vulnerability of the infrastructure.
Right. Pipelines are huge.
Yeah. Even if the political will existed, the engineering reality is a nightmare. Iran has short, medium, and long-range missiles scattered throughout their entire territory.
Yeah, I mean, a pipeline is just a massive stationary target sitting in the desert.
A giant bullseye.
Macgregor points out that Iran could discover a newly built pipeline and destroy it in a few seconds. So all the talk of Iraqi investment bypassing Hormuz is just a fantasy. Nobody's actually investing a dime into new infrastructure because the risk of it becoming a multi-billion-dollar crater is far too high until the conflict stops.
Which raises an important question, though. If economic workarounds like pipelines are impossible and diplomatic alliances in places like Iraq have completely inverted, why doesn't the U.S. just use its overwhelming military advantage to reestablish control?
Well, the source material addresses that exact question by bringing up claims made by Trump himself in the transcript. Trump states he could wipe out Iran's power plants in 1 day and their major bridges in 2 hours. He's leveraging the sheer destructive capacity of the U.S. military as a negotiating tactic.
And Macgregor doesn't deny the technical capability. He acknowledges the U.S. absolutely has the missiles to do that. But he counters with a brutal mechanism of deterrence.
Mutual destruction.
Exactly. Iran's stated policy is an eye for an eye. If the U.S. hits Iranian domestic infrastructure, Iran doesn't have to hit the U.S. mainland. They just have to hit all the regional infrastructure in the Gulf.
Wow. So we are talking about Saudi desalination plants, major refineries, oil shipping ports.
Precisely. It is a regional dead man's switch. And furthermore, Macgregor paints a very grim picture of U.S. military readiness itself. Yeah, he claims the U.S. is severely depleted. His exact phrase is that they're scraping the bottom of the barrel for precision-guided munitions like Tomahawks and JASSMs.
Okay, I have to push back on that, or at least play devil's advocate for the listener here. The U.S. spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. How is it possible that the military is scraping the bottom of the barrel for Tomahawk missiles?
It sounds counterintuitive, I know. But Macgregor's overarching argument is that decades of continuous scattered engagements, combined with supplying massive amounts of high-end weaponry to prolonged proxy conflicts, drain stockpiles faster than the industrial base can replace them.
Ah, so it's a production issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the threat of overwhelming, sustained U.S. military action against Iran is, in his view, largely hollow.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because if the U.S. is depleted and the risk of retaliation is the mutual destruction of the Gulf, what is Iran actually trying to achieve here?
The source outlines a very clear sequential strategy for Iran. Goal number one was simply to survive. And Macgregor claims they have already achieved this.
Just weathering the storm?
Right. He says they were never deluded about their raw firepower compared to the U.S. They just needed to defend their airspace, endure the sanctions, and stay standing.
And because they survived the initial pressure campaigns, Macgregor argues they're moving to goal number 2, which is finishing the job.
Yes.
And to Iran, finishing the job means removing the United States from the region entirely, not by invading the U.S., obviously, but by making the cost of staying just way too high. Smashing U.S. regional bases beyond repair so that reestablishing a ground presence becomes physically and politically impossible.
Which forces us to look at recent U.S. military actions through a completely different lens.
How so?
Well, Macgregor calls the recent U.S. attack on Iran an acid test for U.S. military power. And he claims this test was unnecessary, basically insisted upon by Netanyahu and his allies in the U.S.
So how do we analyze the stark warning Macgregor gives? Because he argues that Netanyahu wants the complete and utter destruction of Iran, but Macgregor warns that a full-scale war wouldn't end Iran. It would end U.S. influence in the Gulf entirely. And, as he stresses, it would mean the end of Israel itself.
It suggests Macgregor views American leadership as fighting a desperate rearguard action, like trying to preserve the fading remnants of military, political, and economic dominance in a region that has already slipped from their grasp.
But if direct military confrontation carries such catastrophic, world-altering risks, how do leaders even justify pushing for new strikes?
That brings us to the sudden influx of new intelligence reports mentioned in the source material. Whenever physical leverage fails, the narrative often shifts to imminent secret threats.
Right. The transcript outlines 2 specific, very alarming pieces of new intelligence that suddenly appeared. First, reports that they have pinpointed the exact location of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. And second, supposedly new secret intelligence that Iran is about to start a new nuclear weapons program at a location called Pickaxe Mountain.
And I mean, on the surface, those sound like classic, undeniable pretexts for an immediate preemptive strike. But Macgregor is deeply, deeply skeptical.
He doesn't buy it.
He dismisses this intelligence completely.
He goes so far as to frame it as a desperate, manufactured attempt by Netanyahu and, by extension, Trump, to keep the conflict going. He actually compares this intelligence drop directly to the situation in Ukraine, doesn't he?
He does, and the comparison is incredibly blunt. He claims Zelensky and Netanyahu are essentially joined at the hip in a shared political need to keep their respective wars burning.
Because that keeps the aid flowing.
Exactly. According to Macgregor, as long as the crisis is active, they keep receiving missiles, funding, and political support.
Right.
Macgregor explicitly declares that Ukraine is destroyed and the nation is finished. And he views the intelligence about Pickaxe Mountain through that exact same cynical lens. He sees it as a mechanism to prolong a conflict that is already strategically lost.
What I found compelling about his argument isn't just the accusation itself, but how he uses historical context to discredit the new intel.
Yeah, he points to the track record.
Exactly. He points out that for the last several years, U.S. intelligence services have reported pretty consistently that there was no evidence of Iran developing a nuclear bomb for use against anyone.
That historical baseline is crucial to his argument. If your own intelligence agencies have consistently said no bomb for years, and suddenly, just when political leaders need a justification for war, you discover Pickaxe Mountain.
Right, it looks incredibly convenient.
Yeah, Macgregor argues that is the definition of manufactured consent. It serves the survival of political leaders, not the strategic reality of the nation.
Okay, let's zoom out and look at the whole board based on this transcript. We have a situation where, according to Macgregor, the economic numbers on Wall Street are hiding physical reality. The diplomatic alliances in Iraq have flipped against us. The military is depleted of precision weapons, and the intelligence driving us toward war is manufactured.
It's a bleak picture.
Very. And if the U.S. is truly fighting a losing battle and being pushed out, well, someone has to step into that vacuum.
Power absolutely abhors a vacuum.
Hmm.
And this is where Macgregor outlines the emergence of what he calls a new order in the Middle East.
A new order.
Yeah, he predicts that over the next few months, the illusion of American control will shatter, and it will become obvious that a new four-state axis is running the region.
And those four states being Russia, China, Iran, and Turkey.
Exactly. He points out that Iran emerges victorious simply by surviving and holding the strait. He claims Turkey, which is a massive regional military power, is currently sitting back watching to see who wins.
Just biding their time.
Right. And Macgregor predicts Turkey will soon get off the bench to join the winning side, cementing this new axis.
But the real drivers of this new order are the two heavyweights, right? Russia and China. The source describes Russia as being in superb condition, arguing they have moved cautiously and successfully husbanded their resources while the U.S. drained theirs.
But the ultimate victor in all of this, the country reaping the massive geopolitical dividends of U.S. missteps, is China.
Yeah, China seems to be the big winner here.
Macgregor calls China the rising power in the world, stating that it is de facto the greatest economy today in terms of purchasing parity, absolutely without question.
Let's define purchasing parity really quickly for you listening because it's a term economists throw around that can be confusing.
Good idea.
Purchasing power parity, or PPP, basically means looking at what money actually buys on the ground rather than just looking at exchange rates. So if it costs the U.S. $1 million to build a specific missile, but China can build that exact same missile with local labor and materials for $200,000, comparing their economies purely in U.S. dollars hides how much physical stuff China is actually producing.
Right. It skews the reality.
So Macgregor is saying that in terms of real-world output, China is already the heavyweight champion.
And that distinction is vital, because Macgregor doesn't just predict military shifts. He warns of absolute economic devastation for the West.
Yeah, he cited some big names on this.
He cites heavy-hitting financial thinkers to back this up, people like Nassim Taleb and Ray Dalio.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Let's bring this massive geopolitical theory down from the stratosphere and look at how it hits your wallet, your savings, and your daily life. Because Macgregor warns that the real world is about to come crashing down on the paper illusions of Wall Street. And the mechanism for that crash is the bond market.
He literally uses the word Armageddon when referring to global energy structures.
Armageddon, that's a strong word.
Very. And here's how that mechanism works. If this conflict escalates, and that eye for an eye deterrence is triggered, the physical infrastructure in the Gulf is destroyed.
Right.
Macgregor claims it won't just be offline for a few months while emergency crews patch it up. He says the damage will be so catastrophic, it will be destroyed for a decade or more.
A decade without Gulf oil. I mean, economic shockwaves of that are almost impossible to calculate. Energy prices dictate the price of literally everything else, right? Shipping, manufacturing, food production. If energy costs spiral out of control for 10 years, inflation goes hyper, central banks lose control, and the bond market, which relies entirely on stable, predictable returns, just implodes.
And here's the ultimate punchline to Macgregor's New Order theory.
What's that?
When the smoke clears from that economic Armageddon, there's only one power in the world with the massive wealth, the industrial expertise, and the surplus capacity to come into the Middle East and actually rebuild that infrastructure.
Let me guess. China.
And that is China.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We started with the paradox of oil prices inexplicably falling while 4 million barrels a day were struck offline in Saudi Arabia. We explored Macgregor's claim that Wall Street shorting is creating a paper illusion that hides the physical reality of Iranian control over the Strait of Hormuz.
And then we examined how the 2003 Iraq War supposedly flipped regional alliances, turning Iraq into an Iranian ally, making bypass pipelines impossible, and rendering the traditional U.S. strategic map completely obsolete.
We dug into the military stalemate, the threat of mutual destruction targeting Gulf infrastructure, the alleged depletion of U.S. precision munitions, and Macgregor's deep skepticism of new nuclear intelligence, which he views as a mere pretext for a catastrophic war.
All of this culminating in his sweeping prediction of a rising new order, a China, Russia, Iran, Turkey axis that leaves the U.S. packing up its depleted forces and stealing away into the night.
Which leaves us with one final, very chilling projection built on this source material. Macgregor points out that the modern state of Israel is largely a product of the Sykes-Picot Agreement.
Yeah, and just to clarify that historical reference for a second, Sykes-Picot was a secret treaty back in 1916 where British and French diplomats literally took a map of the Middle East and a ruler and just drew arbitrary lines to divide up the collapsing Ottoman Empire, largely ignoring the ethnic and religious realities on the ground.
Right. And Macgregor claims that if this new order takes hold and the Western powers that drew those lines are expelled, Israel will face a stark ultimatum from this new axis. Either exist entirely on their terms within their newly defined regional framework, or go away.
It brings us right back to where we started, sitting in that car, looking at a GPS that makes no sense. The source is arguing that the GPS hasn't just lost the signal, a completely different entity is programming the coordinates now.
So we leave you with this to ponder long after you finish listening today. If the U.S. truly does steal away into the night, as Macgregor suggests is inevitable. Wait, let me rephrase that. If the U.S. leaves, what does the map of the Middle East actually look like when the borders and the rules are drawn and enforced by Beijing rather than Washington? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.